Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Transforming Lives podcast panel. And we have a full house again. I'm Charmin. We have Cheryl, Kate, and Mitzi. We're all here today. And we are doing it with a twist. One of our co-hosts is our guest today, and I am so excited. Welcome, Kate, our guest. But before we continue, we're going to do our usual grounding. And over to you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Charmin. Welcome, everybody. And nice to have you as a guest on the other side of our podcast, Kate. So before we start, we will just have a few intentional breaths together. Just slow deep inhale through the nose, and then just let it all go. Feet on the floor. Feel supported in your chair or your seat or your couch or your bed. Just feel the air on your skin. Feel the oxygen going through your nose. Can you taste something? Can you hear anything besides my voice? Just check in with your senses. Brings us to the present, where we can intentionally spend some time together. And we will come back. And Kate, Toye, I'm going to tell everybody all about you, even though they heard you speak. This is a little different twist. So let's dive in. Kate is a self-compassion coach. She works with mamas who are coaches, healers, leaders, and entrepreneurs that have a big vision and a mission in this lifetime. Women that are done with the self-saboteur, being ruled by their inner critic, running on empty, not speaking their truth, and playing small. Working together, her clients learn how to step even more boldly and unapologetically into their purpose. They learn to know and trust themselves. They make sure their voices are heard. They play full out in a big way. They create healthy boundaries and get shit done so they can build their life, their self, family, and business on their terms. So welcome, Kate. Boy, pleasure to have you. Anything you want to add to that I might have missed that you want us to know?
I'm just so excited to be here with you guys, and I just love you to bits. So yay. Thanks for this space.
Right back at you. So can we start off with, so we have, a clear understanding of what is self-compassion? What is being aware of self? And is it just like a massage and a pedicure, or does it go a little deeper than that?
I would say it goes so much deeper than that. And what a beautiful question. Thank you for that. And I think that self-compassion is really, in my experience, quite misunderstood. And also, I know personally, when I started on the path of self-compassion, I didn't really trust it. I didn't really think I would be able to do. I like to get, as I said, shit done. And I thought being compassionate would take that away. I was really driven by my inner critic. And I really thought that was what allowed me to produce all that I was producing. And I know that I've probably shared here many times. I was really like, oh my God, if I can get this much done in 50 hours a week, let's see what I can do with 60. And if I can do this in 60, let's see what I can do in 70. And really not a lot of space for self-compassion, self-awareness, self-kindness, or being self-aware of your body speaking to you, but then shutting it up and pushing it down and still listening to the driver. So it is much deeper than a massage, even though massages are beautiful. And if that's part of your self-care routine, yay. Self-compassion for me, also a big part for me was I couldn't just be self-compassionate until I understood why I couldn't be self-compassionate.
Say more.
So it's one thing to, and I really could get to a point. Like, for example, I really remember at one point being like, okay, Kate, you're triggered in this, internally hearing you're triggered in this moment. And then celebrating that I was so aware that I was triggered and thinking this is as good as it's going to get. right? This is as good as it's going to get. And by going deeper and really, 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 it's really not one before the other. I see self-compassion, self-awareness, understanding self, understanding what happened to you versus what's wrong with you, really holding space for each other to just holistically come in and hold you wherever you are. So, for example, being self-compassionate allowed me to get more curious about the triggers, allowed me to be able to be curious about them as opposed to being judgmental of why am I triggered in this moment.
I find it interesting when you said what happened to you versus what, could you say it again and kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, you bet. So oh my God, I can feel this in my stomach. I can feel this creeping up my back. My internal dialogue was like, what the F is wrong with you? Right? You know that, for example, this isn't the way that you want to be working, or this isn't how you want to show up in relationship, or this isn't how you want to show up as a mom, or that you can't work 70 hours a week, but you're working 70, right? What is wrong with you that you keep falling back into these patterns that you say you don't want? Binge watching Netflix, eating unhealthy, all of the things, right? All of the things that we could come alongside and really judge ourselves for what is wrong with you. And a compassionate way to shift that. And these aren't my words. These are from somebody else. And I think he even wrote a book, What Happened to You, but really what happened to you, right? Everything that's ever happened to me has created my core beliefs, has created how I walk in this world, created what I think of myself, and also what I always go back to, which is Gabor's words. And I know I've shared here. When did I have to sacrifice my authenticity to stay attached to my big people, to my partner, to my job, to my kids, to whoever? And being attached is a human need. However, when we understand ourselves as to what happened to me, how have I given up my authenticity to stay attached? Now let me get curious about that. And that's why I people please. That's why I don't have healthy boundaries. That's why I can't say no. That's why it's quite familiar that people deny my reality because of what happened to me versus what's wrong with me. Does that clear?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Sometimes it's clear in my head, but it might not come out my mouth the way that I want it to.
And for sure, I think that that's something that we all do. Like that I guess negative internal self-talk when it's like, okay, why didn't I get this done? Or why did I procrastinate? Or why is this only at 98% done and I haven't finished that last 2%? Like you have that natural instinct to sort of beat yourself up in essence.
Yeah. Yeah. And my internal voice used to wake me up. I remember 2, 3, 4 in the morning, right? And it would replay a conversation that I had. Why did you say it this way? Why didn't you say this instead? What if they thought you meant this when you said this, when really you meant this? What if they think this of you? And I can really share. And I don't know that I ever thought this was possible. And it's really hard for me to remember what it was like, but my head is silent most of the time, right? Unless I'm thinking of something.
That's such a gift.
And also what it's really allowed is that connection to universe to just be that much more connected. And so universe, I think, is constantly sending us messages. We're constantly in communication with us. And so that chatter isn't blocking what universe is communicating with you.
So what is the process that you went through to get to where you are? Like, what is the process that you take somebody through so that they can achieve more self-compassion and awareness?
Well, I would share I've been through many things, like many for many years. I started meditating at 11. I quit eating meat at 11. I backpacked for like 6 years. I've been on the journey of self for a long time. And what I can share is in the last, I would say 10 years, the narrative around what self-awareness is has really broadened. so many modalities have come online, healing modalities. And I heard, and I would so love to share what this process is that I've now developed. But what I would really love to share, and I just heard this today in an interview, and the woman so beautifully said, we all healers, or, all of the things that we've learned have all held different keys to unlocking certain parts of us. And I absolutely believe that. And I absolutely love that. And I work in the world also of internal family systems, which is like parts work, right? There's a part of me that really knows it has to get this work done. And there's this part of me that's like, just sit and watch another Netflix show, right? These parts. And I even think that our parts maybe need different modalities to whatever their keys are, if that, isn't too wild. But I just really believe that. So what I've been working and weaving through, or my process, is I'm certified as a compassionate inquiry practitioner. So that's really going back to what is the original wounding and what did you make that mean, right? So for example, a child that is, told, don't make mommy mad, don't make mommy sad, right? What is the internal dialogue? Is it that, wow, I'm responsible for this big person's happiness. I am responsible for all of the emotion of this big person. And I can feel that on my body, like, oh my God. And I get kind of chills, right? Like, how much of a burden is that for a tiny child? And so again, back to attachment versus authenticity. If to stay attached, I can't make mommy upset, how am I sacrificing my authenticity? Where do I get to go to cry and be held? And all of my emotions can come out. Well, I can't, because I can't make her sad. So then what do I start to believe about myself? And so that's really the work of understanding yourself from, what happened. And then I weave in internal family systems, which is understanding parts. And then I really lean a lot into somatic experiencing, like understanding what's going on with body. Where does this live in body? What does this feel like in body? Because our head can tell us a total different narrative. But as Bessel van der Kolk says, the body keeps the score. Like, it knows what is. And then when we understand those pieces, then let's wrap that with self-compassion. Then can we be compassionate with self? Then doesn't that make sense? In a compassionate way, doesn't that make sense? And then you get to have a different relationship with yourself.
In the example that you gave there, for example, like a child who's worried about making their mother upset or something, and they go through their process and find that authenticity with themselves, I would imagine that one of the big, that's what I'm looking for, like hurdles or things that kind of hold somebody back from that is, well, then what happens with the relationship with that person who I have been acting in a certain way and hiding my authentic self with to keep that relationship? What happens now if I become my authentic self, and how does that affect the relationship, so to speak? Like, I would imagine that that's in some levels, maybe sometimes a conscious fear, but sometimes a subconscious thing that is holding them back from going through the process or getting everything out of it. How do you sort of deal with that type of stuff?
Right. So if I'm hearing you correctly, there might be some resistance in somebody wanting to do their healing work because there's fear that how it might affect their current relationship with their big people. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Right. So what I love to offer as well is we really go into what is true now. Right. What is true now is that my big people aren't the ones who keep me alive. My big people aren't the ones who create the rules in my house. My big people aren't the ones that I need to depend on for survival. And a really great exercise is if you say you go into your parents' house and you share some news that maybe they aren't, maybe there's a little bit of judgment there on their part, or maybe it's how you raise your kids and you're aware of some judgment. I would just offer to really connect with, how old do I feel in this moment? Right? To just think of that how old do I feel? I for sure can share in one of the worlds that I worked in, somebody would be quite confrontational with me and I would feel like I was shrinking in stature and they seemed to grow. My palms would start to sweat. My words couldn't get to my throat. And I wanted to know what is going on here. And I understood this person had this effect on more people than just me, but also it's not about that person. It's about me. What is going on inside of me, that this is what is happening on the outside, because it never really is about me, right? What she's saying, even if she could be using my name, that's not my truth unless parts of me are rippling that that's your truth. And so I need to get curious about, why do I think that's my truth? If this person is saying shame on you and I feel shame when I know in my heart there's nothing to feel shame for, how do I get curious about where this shame came from? So another big thing that I want to share as well is that there's no fingers to point, because everybody was raised by somebody who was raised by someone who was raised by someone. And also, if you really look at the history of our world and you look at any given time on a timeline of your ancestors and just look at the global picture of what was happening in the world, that's why I really share, like Gabor does, we're all on the spectrum of trauma. We can't not be.
Interesting.
So, okay, thank you. Thank you. As we become self-compassionate and embrace our authenticity, is it as easy as it sounds?
Oh, I love you. And was there an and there?
No, you go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and certainly no. When you're on the other side, your hindsight might be that it was easier than it was, but there is so much grief in healing. You may lose people. You understand what healthy boundaries really mean, which some people don't really like. And what I say by grieving is well, for me, I'll just speak for me, right? I grieved the childhood that I could have had. I grieved the relationships that I could have had. I grieved, and I grieved that people couldn't show up in my life the way that I wish they had. I grieved for what I didn't know when I was raising my kids the very best that I could, reading all of the books, reading the words, logically making sense in the heat of the moment, not responding, but reacting. I grieve for how hard I was on myself for so long. Oh, that just chokes me right up. And that grief too ends. I never will forget the day I was doing dishes and I thought about my long life of not great choices and not really nice experiences and the journey. And I remember being so grateful and thinking, if I could go back, would I change one thing? And I would not change one thing, because this is my purpose. And I had to walk through that to be this. And oh my goodness, if I can be here from where I've been, I know that anyone can.
Talk to us about that healing journey, because oftentimes we want to, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have to find our authenticity, because it's there, but it has been covered with trauma and all of the experiences that we've had, and that created our belief system and that inner critic that you have so eloquently identified and defined. So where do we find the strength to journey through our traumas and be healed so that we can find our authenticity to embrace it?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. I would say I did a lot of solo work, and which is beautiful and necessary for me. And also, I believe it's Gabor that says, we were harmed in relationship. So it's in relationship that we heal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say, be really picky and find somebody that resonates for you to do your healing journey with. And saying no to people that don't ripple through your system as the person is very self-compassionate and very hard for people that are used to people pleasing. Because, oh my goodness, I set up the appointment. They seem to like me. They're nice, but maybe I could just do this a few times and see. I don't want to hurt their feelings, right? It's very, and it's all practice. Like, I can't say that enough. It's all practice. Receiving is a practice. I couldn't receive anything. I could not receive. And I love to gift people my time, sharing resources, especially people that can't receive, because that in itself is an act of a practice of receiving, because it might not have been safe to receive. Or what do I owe if I receive? And so I would share to find somebody who is a fit for you. Mm-hmm. I would share to, and I'm in Thomas Hubble's program now, and it's so beautiful. And he's written a book, he's written two, and his latest one is Attuned, and it's really about communal healing. And his program, I believe, is called, Healing with Spirit or Spiritual Healing. And I've also been hearing this of connecting to something that is bigger than us is also it's a key component to our healing journey. Mm-hmm. And I can speak for myself that when people would say the word God, I'd shut right down and I would tune out and I wouldn't want to hear what they had to say. And then I got gifted, you can just put whatever word you want in there instead. You can put creator, you could put Mother Earth, you can put the universe, and so I started practicing that. And now use whatever word you possibly want. It's not about me. Yeah. So, but I know that connection to bigger than self, bigger than all of us, and the earth, I connect to her every day. She has us. One of my teachers so beautifully said, her pull, I think it's my teacher Guthrie, he said that pull of the gravity is our mother always keeping us close. Mm. So there's more support, I believe, and more love around us than we might be tuned into.
Mm-hmm. So can I ask then, what are the conversations women are having with themselves before they come to see you?
Well, they're having conversations that I probably had with myself, right? They're very hard on themselves. They're critical. Or I have quite a few women that come to me because they're aware that they're parenting through their own childhood wounding, even though they were like me reading all the books and doing all the things when it come to shove, or not even aware. Like, I know I've shared many times the story of my son when he had fear and I couldn't sit with his fear. So I would distract him and let's talk about all the things that are great. But that's him having to compromise his authenticity to stay attached to me, right? His authenticity is, I'm scared and I need someone to sit in this with me. And the reality was I couldn't be in that with him. I couldn't, my system couldn't, I couldn't be in the fear because I had vowed if I brought kids onto this planet, they were going to be safe. Actually, not they were going to be safe. The world was going to be, I was going to make the world safe for them. And oh my God, who can do that? So when they would tell me their fears, it was too much for me. I felt shame. I felt guilty. I felt responsible. I felt I have to make this right. And if I can't make it right, let's look over here to all the things that are going great. But they needed to know that I'm their big person and I got them no matter what. Even if I don't have the answer, I got them because I've got me and I didn't have me. Mm-hmm. So they're having those conversations. I see a lot of women who are healers, coaches, leaders, entrepreneurs that, they have money blocks. They have this story that, and I used to be there. If this is what I do, and I believe that healing is the way that my healing and then helping you heal is how we heal the world, which I 100% believe. How do I charge for this? Right? How do I charge for this? My voice is important, but I'm too afraid to get out there, or I'm an imposter, or everybody else is saying this. What's special about me? Or I'm supposed to have a good job with a pension that has some kind of guarantee, that imaginary guarantee, right? And who am I to be going on my own? What will my parents say? Even though I'm a grown-ass woman, what will my parents say? So those are the kinds of conversations that women are having. And my God, I just love this shift of this divine feminine where women are, I feel it. I mean, my God. And I've felt it for many years, but now it seems wherever I turn, I just hear this dialogue of women are stepping up. They are ready for the world to be done in a different way. I feel it. I see it. And so, and for me, really getting down to that core of what happened to me versus what's wrong with me. And that I can, like for me, my kids are my world and my vision and mission are huge. And I can create a space where they both get to be. And in the middle is me, right? And I think that's the shift, is that caring for self is also so critical to the two of these things.
Do you find that it's a lot more women that are sort of going on this self-exploration? I know for myself that, I've been over the years doing a lot of different programs and courses and sort of, trying to deal with my inner child wounds and different things. And how do I put this? Often when I shared that with males in my life, it's like, oh, it's like, like it's like voodoo, or like it's, it's not real, and, like just not supportive of kind of that whole process. And when I've taken the various programs or classes or worked with coaches, it seems that it's being, at least in the ones that I've been, a lot more females that have been also there going through that kind of journey. And I don't know if it's just coincidence or if that's sort of part of this whole, as you say, Mother Earth kind of has us, and it's part of the female revolution that's going on, that we're giving ourselves time. Because I think by nature, men maybe are better at self-care. They just sort of belong to their sports teams and do their things, and they don't feel guilty about looking after themselves the way we're sort of looking after the kids and the spouse and the parents, and it's part of that caregiver role that a lot of women fall into. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely know the circles that I sit in have a lot of women, and I'm sure the circles that you all find yourself in anything self-care might be more women. I also sit in a lot of business circles. And so I find those are, probably more men. However, what I think is really important is I think men are longing for this kind of healing too. I think the patriarchy hasn't only screwed over women. I think the patriarchy has screwed over humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this chokes me up. I mean, we know it's hard to be a woman. Are you shitting me? We know that. But I think it's hard to be a man. And I think that they too heal in circle. And I think they too heal in community. And I was out for a walk late last night with my son, and we talk a lot about the divine feminine and the divine masculine energies. And his prefrontal cortex is still developing. So there's a lot of black and white for my boy. And he was like, and he has such an interesting view on so many things. Like he thinks that everyone should be given houses, and he's, he thinks that capitalism is the root of all, we need to move, and just a lot of things. However, what I thought was really interesting was he said that masculine and feminine, because I've shared with him, there's a lot of lists that you can see, these are masculine traits and these are feminine traits. And he really believes, and this is kind of where my line of curiosity is going, he really believes those are arbitrary. And he really wonders why we label them. And he really also wonders if labeling them is what's led to men not being curious enough to understand their, quote, feminine. And so instead we use color. We use red and green. And then he said, so what would be under a red trait? And then, so I labeled, I know that receiving is, they say, a feminine, and receiving is a feminine, and I guess giving is the masculine. And so he wanted to know why. And then he wanted to know, is that really the flip side of a coin, or are those two not kind of the same? And then he wanted to know what made it so. Who said that's the masculine and who said that's the feminine? And then we talked about, women reproducing. And then he said, right, but that's just because of the equipment you have. And if men could, don't you think that they would? And then don't you think that is more connected to strength than not? And then he wanted to know why strength was masculine, but perseverance was feminine, when aren't those two the same? And so it really got me thinking in a different, because I've just started reclaiming the feminine as of January 2021, because for whatever, if it's arbitrary or not, whatever those traits are that they say were masculine, I was in it hardcore. And I've shared this with Cheryl, and I probably have shared it here. I'm not sure, but I just in hindsight find it so hilarious, because I wanted to learn how to reclaim the feminine. So I started looking for the checklist. Like, you can't be more masculine than looking for the to-do list. And I like, what book can I read? Where can I find this? Who can I talk to? Where, right? As opposed to the feminine is already in all of us. The masculine is in us, the healthy masculine, the healthy feminine, right? So what do I need to do to understand how to reclaim that for me? So to go all the way back, to circle back to your question, Mitzi, I do see so many more women in this circle, but I do think that the road has probably been much easier for men, whatever that road is. I think it's the old road. I don't think it's the way that we move forward into a new world. But I do think men need this healing more than maybe they even realize. I think it's what ripples out. And, I hear so much talk of this new world. I don't know if you sit in the circles that talk of this new world. And the new world isn't like we get taken away somewhere and we get gifted a new earth. Mm-hmm. Right? The new world is here, and it's created by the way that humanity shifts and understands that the earth creates everything that we possibly need if we don't exploit her, right? That if we all can live in balance, there's everything that we need here. And this old way, or the current way, or whatever you want to call it, the more reading I do, it's much older than I ever realized of this crab in the bucket mentality, for lack of a better word.
I find it so comforting, though, that there are women on these healing journeys, because it does ripple through the earth, and men do receive it. Men do feel it. It's still a ripple effect, whether they're actively or not actively. I think we are still rippling as humans, which I think is
100%. And also I want to add, Cheryl, women give birth to boys, right? Like we are raising children who are growing into adults. So by me doing my inner work is creating, right? I'm changing the DNA of my children, the ones who are male and the ones who are female. And the more work that we do collectively, the more it can't not ripple out to the world. It can't not.
Yeah.
And I thought I was a pretty compassionate person prior. And I'm so surprised by being more compassionate to myself. My compassion for others is like amped. Oh my God. I can't even express how my mind goes right to, oh my goodness, they must have been having a bad day, or, oh my goodness, right? It's not a judgment ever. It's, I wonder what happened to them.
And imagine what's going to ripple out from the conversations you are having with your son in his connections. Like, it's right there. It's right there. I applaud you for having those conversations. I think that's beautiful. If someone is contemplating, oh, maybe I need this work, maybe, and everybody needs this work, but if someone is actively listening to this podcast saying, this is definitely something I need to look into or start investigating and receiving, what parts of you kind of along the way went, oh, okay, that's the work I've done? Like, what parts of you were tangible? What did you feel? What did you think when you went, oh, that is exactly what I was looking for or needed?
I love it. I love it. So first off, I want to start this with, I absolutely love my mom. That's what I'm going to say in the beginning here. And what I'm very aware of was I went to her house, and I don't know how many years ago this is now, but a few. And I said something like I would normally say, and she said something like she would normally say. Actually, you know what? I'm going to back that up. And again, start with, I absolutely love my mom. And I read all the time, and I always love to share. So I always am bringing books down to their house. And she kept one called It Didn't Start With You. And she would give me back. And my mom is like, I don't know how many, I don't know if it was 200 books or something that she read like that first year of COVID. So my mom is a reader, right? So she'd give me back the books and I'd figure she read them. So she gave me back the books and she said, but I'm going to keep this one. It Didn't Start With You. And she was like, there's some interesting things in here. And she said, and it wasn't one of those books that you brought to tell us all the ways we did wrong raising you.
Ooh.
Never my intention.
Yeah.
However, I got curious about what kind of energy do I bring in to this space? And I said, it chokes me up. I was like, Mom, that was never, that my nose is prickling, right? I was like, Mom, that was never my intention. But obviously something in her felt that was.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't matter what I brought down there, what I said, it didn't matter. So, and again, I was down at the house and I said something and she said something that she would normally have said. And it didn't prickle inside my body like it usually did. It just didn't. And I checked in with myself and I said something else and she said something else that would normally prickle inside my body. And I checked in again. Ooh. And I was like, are you shitting me right now? Like, really? Like, really? Is this really happening? Right? So I kept checking in with myself and there was nothing. And then I was aware of how different the interaction was with me and her. And then again, I reflected on even more so than the book. Wow, what kind of energy did you bring into this space? Not intentionally. And so then I was like, okay, this is something. This is something. And where else in the world may I be bringing that energy into without even knowing it? And no judgment, right? I always have to go, I wasn't even aware of it.
Yeah. What freedom.
Oh my God.
It's like the chains. I can like physically feel it, shaking the chains. And
I feel so free. I feel so free. And I so want that for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Cause I know what it's like to carry all that weight all the time.
I feel like we need a bottle of Merlot and, 4 glasses, but we're running to the end of our time together for this one anyway. I'm sure there'll be another one. Any other last words, Sharman, Mitzi, Kate, any other questions?
I just think it was so fabulous that sort of, the reality is no one gets through life unscathed, right? Crap happens to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, the reality is our parents did the best job they could with the skills and the knowledge that they had and with the upbringing that they had with all the stuff that was brought to them. And that was one of the things I think that as, I started on my journey, sort of realizing that, they're doing the best that they can with the skills that they have. And as I say, with those experiences and realizing, as you get older, you realize, because you can see things that you couldn't see when you were a kid, the struggles that our own parents had to go through and the traumas and the things that we were unaware of because we were kids and they were shielding us and they didn't, they were trying to protect us and do those things. And how, as you say, it's in our DNA because it goes back generations and generations of the traumas that have been there and how they get handed down from generation to generation, and making yourself aware enough to sort of start to say, okay, you know what? I've got to deal with these past traumas and so I can free myself to be the best that I can and be compassionate with myself and, do all those things. And I think as you sort of explained that journey, it was really great to sort of let people kind of see the path, both forwards and backwards.
Thanks, Mitzi. And I really would love to share as well that this work is not just for you. This work is for your kids and all future generations. And I honestly believe this work is also for our ancestors. I have no doubt about it that when we heal, the ripple effect is beyond linear time. And there's an ad that I'll never forget where the kids were like, they would say, my parent, it was a bunch of like a child's face. And they were like, my mom would run into a burning building for me. My mom would, sacrifice her lunches for me, like all the things they would. And then I remember the kid saying, but would you drive a minivan? Like it was like, right. And I love that commercial and I reflect on it so much. Like the best thing you can do for your kids, the best thing is to do your work. The best thing. It is, there's nothing like it. And also I have to go back to be compassionate with yourself. If you're reading the books, I was reading the books. I was doing all the things. I was going to conferences, everything on, Daniel's beautiful work, parenting from the inside out, all of it. But it did not ripple the way that it does now because it couldn't, because there was so much blockages in me.
So who are we looking for? Are we looking for a self-compassion coach? Is that if people are now going, okay, how do we work with you, Kate? Where do we start? Where do we look?
I would say start first off wherever you are, wherever you are, right? Mitzi said where she started was she realized, that it wasn't her parents' fault and they were doing the best they could. That's not where I started. I started with they wanted to have kids. They should have known better. Mm. And that is so uncompassionate and so judgmental. And it's where I was because of where I had been. Mm-hmm. So be kind to yourself. Start wherever you are. Remember, it's a practice. Maybe it starts with moving your body. Maybe it starts with connecting with something bigger than self. Maybe it starts with going to bed at a nice time. Maybe it starts with just taking stock of that internal dialogue and saying, we're going to talk a different way from now on. Maybe it's reaching out to a coach. It's wherever you are. I don't know you, and I trust that you know you better than anyone. But what I would say is do what's right for you. Interview. If you're going to work with somebody, interview them. If they don't offer you a space to get to know them before they work with you, that doesn't work for my system. I couldn't do that. Have a way that you can stop working with them, right? I work in a way that you're going to sign a letter of agreement, but if this isn't a fit for you, you're not going to stay with me.
Yeah.
Right? Really be your own best advocate, right? Imagine you're advocating for somebody else who you really care about and then give that to yourself when you find who you want to work with.
Good advice.
And there's bazillions of books out there. I'm reading Resma's My Grandmother's Hands right now. Oh my word. If you don't have that book, pick it up.
We will put all of this in the show notes for the listeners as well.
To talk about what passes down through our DNA.
Interesting and impactful and insightful and empowering. Very grateful for this conversation, Kate.
I'm so grateful for each of you. And I'm so grateful for everyone listening because I know that doing our own healing is what will change our world.
Thank you, Kate. This is really great. And I think our listeners are going to this will be one that they'll listen to again and again to try to get those nuances of things. So that's fabulous.
I'm so grateful for each of you.
So thank you for listening to another episode of the Transforming Lives. Feeling a little transformed today. And we will see you next time. Thanks for stopping by.